Hi, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are listening from. My name is Jessica Corvo, and it brings me tremendous pleasure to have an opportunity to have a chat with one of my favorite human beings in the world, Mr. Robert. We are celebrating Mental Health Extravaganza, and during the month, we are going to be showcasing personal stories of survival, triumph, tragedy, you name it, we got it. And we're also going to be showing some of our favorite tips and tricks and tools in order to actively or proactively manage mental health. So today, Robert is going to talk to us about the importance of reality testing. Now, I do not know what this exactly means, so Robert is going to be our subject matter expert, and he is going to walk us through a little bit of personal journey and a lot of how this has helped him become the well-balanced human being that he is, and one of my favorite people. So with that said, Robert, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
No problem. It's great to be here, and I'm feeling stoked that this is happening.
Absolutely. No, thank you. It's been humbling because I think for a lot of my communities and a lot of the things that I'm involved with, I've been actively shifting from the domestic violence space into the violence in the workplace space. And then it was like, I don't really know what I want to talk about, but I am, socially one of those people that likes to push boundaries and give different perspectives. And so mental health is a no-brainer because we see this collective, number one, with an increase. There's over 43.8 million people with diagnosed mental health issues, right? And that translates into 1 in 5, with normal, whatever we classify as normal mental health issues. But then critical mental health, it's 1 in 10, and that's specific to the US. So as soon as I heard those statistics, I'm like, heck yeah, I'm going to donate my platform for the whole month and share, whatever people are willing to share. So I'm pretty excited about it. So thank you for being willing to, number one, volunteer, and number two, share some of your time with me, because I know that you are very busy and very productive, more importantly. So to everybody listening, Robert is a published author. He is probably one of the smartest people I know. He knows the most random information, but it's not really random. So if you sit down and you can literally have a conversation talking about anything from the Silk Road over in different parts of the world to random facts on sailing in Lake Michigan, all the way to playing instruments up in Minnesota. You're from Minnesota, right? Up in
Yeah, from
Minnesota.
St. Paul.
Yeah, I mean, there's no saying where our conversations go. So let's dive straight in. What caused you to understand or actually have that curiosity in the importance of reality testing?
So I kind of fell into this whole space. I was, um, and looking back, I sort of realized that it was almost inevitable that I would end up in it.
Mhm.
So I moved back to Chicago in 2012. I came here for college and thought it was great. Went back home. Chicago was more exciting, so I came back and I interned at a media startup that was advised by someone who worked at this organization that I'm working with now. He didn't introduce me to the place, but a few years later, I met someone who used to work there. We went through the Startup Institute together in my cohort, and then my friend Natalie, who's also an entrepreneur, she introduced me to the Wright Foundation, which focuses on human potential and transformation,
Personal
and
development.
personal development,
Yeah.
and I've just kept saying yes to everything that they've offered me.
Awesome, awesome. So a little bit of background is also Robert and I met when I was living in Singapore, and during one of his projects, we were connected and we became friends before we actually met. And he was one of the few people that gave me an absolutely warm welcome when I moved back to Chicago. And so this is why he holds a special place in my heart. So just so everyone understands that he's not just a decent human being, but he also has that curious mind.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah cool. Yeah, and one of the things that I learned in the course of doing things with Wright is reality testing, and what you can do. And that's one of the things that's really stuck with me. It's one of those tools where it's like, oh, I wish I had this before.
So what exactly is reality testing?
Reality testing is really being honest with myself and really asking myself, what is real? What is factually real?
So it's like radical truth.
Radical truth.
So like a lot of times we lie to ourselves, because if we're an ego, the ego is always trying to find ways to protect ourselves. So we can change our perception of reality in order to make us feel, a little bit less bad. Not that I agree with good and bad, but
and it's also informed by previous experience and so the things we tell ourselves, the self-talk that we give to ourselves. But reality testing is saying, stop. Okay, what's real? What's not real? What can I show to be true? And what is not? And what is not factually true, I can ignore it.
So the mind is incredibly strong, and a lot of people can argue that what you think can become, thoughts, words, things, right? It can become your reality. So if you're actually doing this, how do you quantify what is truth?
What you quantify as truth is if you can prove it, like legitimately prove it. And you can do this by yourself. You can do this with someone. It's actually better to do it with somebody else, because they can, if you fall behind, they can catch you. But if you say, here's what's going on, here's what I think is going on, and they can say, okay, what is actually true? Is this thing you think, is this, you're about to get in trouble with the boss? Is what you've done something that's worth getting in trouble for? Is the mistake you made that serious, or something like that?
So I think that would actually be really powerful for people within the trauma space to try to understand, because me being a survivor of trauma, that's something that I actively do on a regular basis, is to find out the reaction or the emotional response or whatever I'm feeling that's cropping up. Is it acceptable, in my opinion and my perception, to the actual event that's happening, or is this my trauma that's cropping up that I need to kind of hold my space through? So it's interesting. It might also be valuable for people with anxiety. So people that are kind of like always in a position like in the future or something, that helps ground them to get them back into the present moment.
That's me. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, cool. Or would you be willing to walk us through kind of a sample of how this has helped you, like for maybe like your own personal story? Like what was your first aha moment when you were doing this reality testing?
Well, probably going back to the book. So the
I'm sorry, who developed the reality testing?
It goes back, that would be Sigmund Freud.
Perfect. Okay, so now sidebar. So let's go back.
So the book I wrote was for the publisher I was working for, who we met, and Jess and I met through this publisher, who I will not name. I'll call him Voldemort.
He's a matchmaker. I mean, that's a positive thing. We met because of it.
he who must not be named, Voldemort. So the book so the book's name is Hiroshima and Nagasaki, an illustrated history anthology and guide.
Right.
And Voldemort wanted this book because he saw a documentary on when the 50th anniversary rolled around, the Air and Space Museum put on a display of the Enola Gay, which is the plane that dropped the first bomb, and it acknowledged the civilian casualties. And the American Legion, which is a veterans organization, sued the Smithsonian and said, take it down, it's dishonorable, and all of that. So Voldemort saw a documentary about this, and he thought, well, the 70th anniversary is coming up. Maybe we can make a book about this event that really dives into a lot of this, and the American Legion will sue us, and the resulting publicity will make this book a bestseller.
Wow. So that's actually going into it from the starting gate. the intention was not pure. It
No.
wasn't from an educational perspective, but it was for what is, even if it's questionable, how do we gain visibility?
Right.
Because sometimes bad press is still press for a lot of people. It's interesting.
Right.
Okay.
And that was not my intention in making this book.
Right. And I assume that you weren't aware that that was the intention. That was like a hidden agenda that you weren't privy to.
Oh no, this was from the start. That's what he wanted.
Oh, okay.
Time goes on. I try to make this thing about as normal and not controversial as I could.
Right.
The book begins to wind down, and I'm having lunch with Voldemort, and he says, and he mentions Iris Chang, who was a journalist. She wrote a book called The Rape of Nanking, became a prominent public figure.
Right.
And he said, you know what? We're almost picking up where Iris Chang left off. And then, and this is the strangest thing he ever said to me. He said, but be careful, because Iris was so disturbed by what she saw, by what she wrote about, that she killed herself, which is true. She did. And so I had sort of those two things in the back of my mind. So the book comes out, no one buys it. I have opinions about how the book came out, what was in it, how it was rolled out.
Yeah. So a little bit of a pause. So to kind of pull everything together for everyone that's listening, we're in a situation, we're taking the, I just lost the name of it, the radical truth. What is the process called?
Reality testing.
Reality testing. Sorry, for me, this is a new concept, everybody. So for the reality testing, just to put everything in context, we're going through a process, a real life process of reality testing, and the outline is Robert was contributing for a book and acknowledges that the publisher, the person, the project manager, and everyone, they had a different agenda going to it. Also, the topic could compromise your sense of reality because it's such a dark topic. And then because of that, you're compromising kind of your personal integrity, and also creating a lot of disharmony within the mind, because you're talking about things that are actually, you know, quite traumatizing. So, okay, now back to the reality testing.
So then one day in January or February, this is about 4 years ago, I could barely leave my room because I was so another thing about Iris Chang is she was writing a book on the Bataan Death March, which is another traumatizing thing. And she was on her way to an interview, and she could not leave her hotel room. She was convinced that government agents were after her. And I woke up in February of 2017, convinced that the American Legion or someone was going to knock on my door and serve me with a lawsuit or take me away or any of those things. And I really couldn't function. And I saw a doctor. I was given Prozac. I calmed down considerably. But the important thing that I had to do, that I eventually learned how to do, was to reality test. It's like, no, the American Legion is not going to sue me. They don't care because this book didn't sell at all. The government does not, I haven't committed a crime, so no one is going to take me away. It was really a not well done project that was put out, and there really wasn't a whole lot I could do to improve it, which happens not just in publishing, but in the world in general. And there's a deeper truth that I got to pretty recently about this is I have this belief that I have to make my parents proud of me. I don't have to, because they are. They have said so. And and that is another thing to reality test on. It's like I had that mistaken belief, and one of the ways to dispel it was to simply ask.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think, me coming from the trauma space, I decided to do, my, I guess, reality testing simply by calling myself out in open processing. So, number one, I recognize that multiple realities exist, at the same time, my reality and then the reality of people that are trying to hurt me. And then also the reality of people that I try to share my story with. And there's a lot of people, I can't remember what it's called, but I just listened to audiobook from Malcolm Gladwell, and he was talking about, it was talking with strangers, and he was talking about the default truth or something similar to that, on how people that live kind of in a bubble or they're not exposed to harsh realities, their default is to automatically assume that people are good. So when we talk about traumatizing things, people, it's not that people don't want to believe us, it's because they don't have any frame, like a frame of comparison. They've not been exposed to anything that would convince them that people are really that evil, or that this type of evil actually exists, right? So tying that back to, when I opened up and started sharing my personal story, it's very interesting to me as I'm, reflecting on your sharing, that a lot of people probably use this practice and this tool without knowledge, because it would be the same thing if you're, in a situation, and if I was like, hey, Robert, this is kind of what I'm going through. Can I get your perspective? That is a form of reality testing, because it's saying, I'm not 100% sure if I'm looking at this with a clear mind.
Yeah.
And then you could see it from a rational mind rather than an emotional mind. And whether that means people writing stuff out and embracing some of the criticisms and or perspectives that are shared from it, or accomplishing a goal, or having a coffee chat with, or sharing a pot of tea with a friend. And it's very interesting. So I think that's great that you were able to also take the reality testing and not just apply it from a business perspective, but also to a personal perspective. So I'm proud of you for that.
Sure. It took a long time to get there, but yeah.
I think it's also really interesting on how if we're not careful, I personally think that it's kind of tied to grounding, right? So no matter what we're doing, no matter what, you always have to get back to self. Because if you spend too much time in other people's realities, a lot of stuff can happen.
They'll consume you. They'll consume you.
A lot of stuff can happen. I mean, being a group fitness instructor, I can pull people into my world and they can think anything is possible. We can bust out, 225 push-ups or 500 sit-ups without thinking twice about it.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not careful to manage the actual capabilities, people can hurt themselves because they just have all that energy and they're like, yeah, we can do anything, we can do anything, we can do anything. So it's on, both sides, but you always have to be able to ground and say, what are my limits? What am I actually capable of? And that mind is just so incredibly powerful.
And what's real?
Yeah.
That's the core of it, is what's real.
Yeah. So you said something interesting just before we hit record on how a lot of times this can also be applied to relationships. So people like communicating and stuff like that. How exactly does this relate to the reality testing, relate to relationships?
So all relationships are built on a set of shared facts. Mm-hmm. And if two people are going through a relationship with two very different sets of facts, that's when relationships break down. Mm-hmm. To bring it back, I know I'm going back to a workplace setting, but Voldemort's explanation, the way he explained it was, you have your set of, you have your version of events, I have mine. Mm-hmm. And my counter to that is, I have my version of events that I can prove. Mm-hmm. And you, Voldemort, have of your version of events, which is based on not much. Mm-hmm. So,
but I think it's a difference. I think also, in context of mental health awareness, a lot of people have the fragmented mind, right? So if you can oversimplify that, a lot of times the ego is doing whatever it can to protect you. Then if people are exposed to some kind of trauma and they're unconscious about the trauma, it could be generational trauma, and it's just been normalized to a point that they don't even realize that they're being harmed, mm-hmm. right? And that distorts their concept of reality. And so it could be actually very true for them. But then it seems very obscure for us because again, when you're doing the reality testing, it's about being able to prove different things. So it's interesting.
Yeah, it's about digging down and seeing past what our egos are trying to tell us, because we know what our egos are trying to do.
If only everybody knew that ego is not always our ego.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I have those moments all the time. Like, yo, ego's coming out real loud and proud right now. All right, do your thing. We'll wait.
Yeah. I mean, as long as we look past it and see what is real in front of us.
Absolutely. Because I think, I mean, in context of the US and all the stuff that's happening, we've just passed 1 year with the pandemic. And I think it's incredible on how easily manipulated the collective is on like politics and the Black Lives Matter, the Stop Asian Hate. I mean, these things are taglines that are coming up right now, but they've existed for a very long time.
Yeah.
So the fact that people are getting, riled and ruffled and whatever, they're not seeing the big picture of racism as racism. They're looking at it like very kind of in silos.
In the moment.
In the moment. And to me, I oversimplify with your monkey mind is being hijacked. And as soon as, not a scientist, so I don't know the frontal lobe, I have no idea. All I know is the emotional mind versus the rational mind. And to me, the reality testing is helping us go from that emotional mind space into the rational mind space because they're quantifying different things, right? And I think a lot of people with like the pandemic, they could probably benefit from this.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, we might not have any more altercations over toilet paper. We might actually have people focusing on being a decent human being and loving everybody, not just one race at a time. Well, not just one race at a time. I mean, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. And I also think that, in context of relationships, the deeper that you're able to dive to understand yourself, and as long as you come to a relationship as best as you can as a whole person, you don't have to have the same backgrounds. You don't have to have the same experiences, but if you have that same willingness, you can actually have a pretty incredible relationship.
The willingness to hold another person as they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So how have you seen your interpersonal relationships shift after doing the making reality testing part of your norm?
I've been more honest with myself about what I want.
Cool. And you also celebrate those mini wins too.
Yes.
Which also helps.
Yes. So for example, I had a friend for quite a while right now anyway, for a lot of my friends, I am the tour guide.
Okay.
And I think I've been in this role with you a few times.
I introduced you as the most resourceful person in Chicago all the time. I was like, if you want to know anything about Chicago, this is Mr. Chicago.
Yeah.
I have no qualms about that.
Yeah. So it's like, I know all the, here are these cool places. Let me show you. And
I've also been trying to get him to monetize that. I'm like, if you're Mr. Chicago, you should charge people consulting for all of this.
But the thing was, I wasn't always the tour guide in my groups. I came across someone who served in that role, and I wanted to either by hanging out with her, I became that good, or I unconsciously wanted to be that good. So I grew into that. But the thing was, she kept talking about how she wanted to build a business. And in all the time I knew her, she never actually did anything to start this hypothetical business.
So it's a dream.
It's a dream.
Yeah.
With no expiration date on it.
That's okay. And sometimes dreams are what keeps people going.
And finally, we had a breach, and I said to myself, well, I can either keep doing this and support her in her efforts to build a business she is never going to actually take the first step in doing, or I can focus on people who are actually doing what they do. Yeah. Looking to grow themselves and grow their businesses and so forth. And it's like, I'd much rather do that.
Yeah. I think that's important, because I feel we've normalized enmeshment, so emotional confusion. we've normalized codependency, prioritizing other people before self. And just with those two things alone, it becomes abnormal to exert your voice. And it becomes, now it's classified as being rude. I mean, living in Asia for 11 years, it's not rude, it's normal. I mean what you say what you mean. I'm pretty sure Dr. Seuss is the one that said that. I don't remember.
Sounds like one of his, but
yeah. And in the US, it's become smoke and fire type of situation, where you don't always know where you stand.
Yeah.
And the result is we're not leading anything in the world anymore other than incarceration rates. And so I think, it's very interesting to kind of, take a step back and have that ability or that tool to find out if people are able to walk their talk, and and how you're investing your own time. Because at the end of the day, you want to pour into cups that are pouring into yours, right?
Oh yeah.
Otherwise, this is, if you're pouring into cups that don't reciprocate, this is the fastest way to having a mental breakdown and becoming one of those statistics of the 43.8 million.
Yep.
Yes, I'm proud of you. So I think also doing the reality testing is a way to protect your mental health. Yes. And to proactively make sure that you're always evaluating kind of the need. And it's not to say that it's selfish, it's just saying that this is what should be normalized. Is if I'm focusing on myself, you're focusing on yourself, I'm contributing, I'm healthy, so I'm contributing to you, you're healthy, so you're contributing to me. That's where like magic happens.
That's where magic happens.
Yeah.
And I had a thought, but I've lost it.
Sorry, I go on tangents all the time.
And the other great benefit of reality testing is the world is not as demon filled if you see the world as it is.
Yeah.
It's a lot safer, it's a lot calmer than it's made out to be. It's not the battlefield it's made out to be sometimes. But
that's also, that's a tactic from the media and governments and stuff to control people, right? Because again, if you're in an emotional mind, specifically from a trauma space, people forget that there's options. There's always options. There's options and consequences for everything. And not doing something is an option. It's a choice.
Yeah.
Right. So you have a choice to go left, choice to go right, choice to stay where you are.
Yeah.
And plenty of things.
Media is also part of the reason why it does what it does is to keep people's attention.
Yeah, but if you're in an emotional state, you forget the element of choice.
Yeah.
And you forget the element of options. And so you think that this is the only thing you can do. So like it was interesting because being in Chicago, we have a semi-high crime rate. And now that summer is starting, I know there's a lot of people that are talking about gun violence and what is it, like all the gang violence and stuff like that. And for me, being a survivor of gun violence, I think it's ridiculous because you can't stop it. There's no predictability with it. You just focus on the good stuff when it happens, if it happens. How are you going to navigate that and then be on your way?
Yeah.
Why agonize over it?
So, well, what I'll say about that is I've lived on the south side of Chicago for the better part of 9 years.
Yeah, you've been on the hood. I started on the north side, and when I moved to the north side, we had the Rogers Park serial killer.
That's right. Yeah.
Literally 2 weeks after. I'm like, man, I should have gone to the south side.
Yeah. And this is my white male privilege speaking, but I've many a night stumbled home in the dark at very late hours. I've never had a gun pointed at me. I have never had anything happen.
Yeah. Well, you're just a bright light and a bundle of joy. So I don't know why anybody would ever try to ruffle you. For those listening, Robert is a very unassuming gentleman. He is kind of like a slight disheveled professor type. Handsome, unassuming, and always has a book, always walks around with a backpack of some sort with his current projects and or books of his liking. He's very traditional with prefers reading things rather than having like the audiobooks or anything. So he's I wouldn't say would be an easy target, but if you're walking around with things, then people might be curious to know what's inside those things. And so, but yeah, I'm glad that you've not been exposed to any of that, because I think that's a beautiful example on how people try to hijack our keep us in an emotional state, hijack our minds into thinking, fear mongering. and thinking that there's a whole bunch of bad stuff. But again, if
Mhm.
you get in the present moment, people are good.
People are
People are
good.
so good. I think that's awesome.
They're going through life just like us. They're just as afraid as we are. They have all the emotions we have.
Insecure,
And
not afraid, insecure.
yeah,
Okay, so Robert, I know that you are an eligible bachelor. So in terms of relationships and stuff like that, is this like a topic, like an icebreaker that you do for dating and stuff to understand reality testing? Because I think that'd be a brilliant idea. What do you know about reality testing?
I haven't used it as an icebreaker,
Mm,
but I use it on people
yeah,
as a way of, oh, maybe that relationship won't work out. Maybe
yeah.
that one won't work out.
Yeah, I think that's one of like the hardest things. A lot of my girlfriends, we have conversations on dating after abuse. So what does that look like? And this is going to obviously be another tool that's probably going to be in a lot of those conversations, because sometimes, you know, with abuse, it happens because number one, people don't talk about it, and then number two, it's inconsistency. So
Mhm.
for me, the moment somebody's inconsistent, I'm out. And that is because of my experience and my framing. I was like, no, consistent or bust. And if you can't be consistent, I'm not going to trust you with anything. You're out. And, is it harsh? Maybe. But at the end of the day, it's not.
You're keeping yourself
You're
safe.
keeping yourself safe. Why go against what you know to be true and your own experience on the sake of maybe? Because especially if somebody knows your past, they should be acting a little bit better to make sure that they're being as consistent as possible, or
Oh
at
yeah.
least holding themselves accountable for their inconsistencies. So I think, like, in context of dating, using this reality testing would be very powerful, again, with, okay, are they really being inconsistent, or was I triggered by something and that's making me think that they're being inconsistent? So I
Mhm.
think that small nuance, which, maybe if people are listening are part of the survivor community, they know. People that don't, they think I'm crazy. I'm okay with both.
Yeah.
That's very interesting. Okay, cool. Well, Robert, I very much appreciate, you explaining what is like the reality testing and sharing a little bit about, the things that you handle. It's got to be really difficult when, you get so engaged in a project that you don't necessarily understand what is reality, versus, what is like the work, right?
Mhm.
And I think a lot of people can benefit. So how can people find more information about reality testing? Just like Google? Is there a book? Like,
Google. I'm blanking on where Sigmund Freud talks about it, but
mhm,
I will find it and we'll put a link associated with this somehow. If I do find,
cool.
I will find it. I
He's an
find, I
academic, so
find,
yes.
I find things. Finding things is my superpower, so I'll find it.
So, sidebar, one of my favorite things about Robert, there are many, is the fact that you can have a conversation with him. And maybe like a couple days or a week later, you can have the same conversation, but he has an entire, like, auxiliary, or I don't even know if I'm using the right words, like artillery of different facts and figures and everything to have, normally our conversations, he already knows everything, but on stuff that he might not have that deep a knowledge on, he does his research. So he reads a lot. So we'll go ahead and drop the links in the bio. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, share, what are you doing professionally? How can people work with you or connect with you?
You can find me at the Chicago Startup Digest. If you look that up, it's put out by Techstar. I put it out with Techstar's help every Friday morning.
Cool. So you're an editor now too.
Yes.
Congrats. I'm proud of you.
You can find me on Instagram and LinkedIn, OCONN270. I'm looking for full-time work or for paid clients as a freelancer. I write, I edit it, I take photos, I can help you with your website. And if you know anybody who works at Euromonitor, Accenture, or Mintel, get in touch with me.
Nice, nice. Those are good. Those are good targets to have.
Yeah.
Very good targets. I think, like, doing corporate wellness, one of my targets was McDonald's. And people are asking, they give me such a hard time, like, why do you want to work for McDonald's? And I said, well, because if you look at what they do for their foundation, they do such incredible work. And then if you look at their business model, I mean, it's incredible. It's literally the biggest in the entire world, right? And the franchise model, and people are it's good for a lot of people. It empowers them, it teaches them about business and helps them. A lot of communities have been improved specifically by having the tools to open up that franchise, right? I just don't agree with some of the food that they sell. I don't think that some of it is actually classified as actual food. And
That's
so
that's fair.
I would like to, in Asia, they had corn instead of potato, like not potatoes, the French fries. So small things you can, make like some of those chefs and some like the products, or just at least have a conversation, or boost some of the mental clarity when people are, doing the same thing over and over again. You can get into like that spiral and just lose track. Reality testing could be useful for them too. Because they think that they're a machine rather than a person.
Yep.
Because it's kind of like an assembly line, like set up if you're in one of the restaurants. So yeah.
Having worked at one, yes, it can get very monotonous.
Yeah, absolutely. So you gotta keep it fun, gotta keep it in the present moment. Well, Robert, I appreciate you being able to share some time, and thank you so much. In the spirit of mental health awareness and this extravaganza, we are just sharing our best, stories, journeys, and tools to help the masses. And I very much appreciate you being able to share one of your favorite tools that has helped you not just professionally, but also personally. So Robert, thank you so much for having time to share that with us.
You're welcome.
And for everyone else, we will definitely put all the links in so you guys can connect with Robert. And his target companies are Accenture,
Euromonitor, and Mintel.
Euromonitor and Mintel. So anybody with connections into those companies, please reach out. Thank you.